The kitchen smelled like coffee and old wood when Dad slid the papers across the granite island. My brother Dylan stood by the sink, arms crossed, watching me like I was about to fail a test. The notary sat at the end with her stamp ready, her expression blank and professional. "Just sign here, Lauren," Dad said, tapping the signature line with his finger. "It's a family loan. Simple stuff. We help each other out, right?" I picked up the pen, my hands shaking slightly. The heading read Member Contribution Agreement, not Loan Agreement. My stomach twisted, but Dad's impatient stare made me feel like questioning it would prove I wasn't trustworthy. Like I was being difficult over nothing. "Be a good daughter," he added, softer this time. I signed. The pen scratched across the paper, making my signature permanent. The notary stamped it immediately, and Dad pulled the document back before I could read the rest. He folded it and tucked it into his folder with a satisfied nod. But before he could close that folder completely, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the signature page. The flash lit up the kitchen for half a second. Dad didn't notice. Dylan didn't either. The notary was already packing up her stamp. I had no idea then how important that photo would become. I walked out onto the porch, needing air. The cold bit at my face, but it felt better than the heat rising in my chest. My hands were still trembling as I opened my phone and typed out a text to myself. November 14th, 4:47 p.m. Witnesses: Dad, Dylan, notary named Brenda Keller. My name is Lauren Pierce. I'm 26 years old, and I just signed something I didn't fully understand because my father asked me to trust him. Because family doesn't question family, or so I'd been told my entire life. The screen door creaked open behind me. My Aunt Patty stepped out, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. She looked at me with that familiar expression, the one that said she knew something was wrong but wouldn't say it out loud. "Don't make this ugly, Lauren," she said quietly. "Your dad's trying to build something. Don't ruin it by overthinking." I wanted to ask her what ugly meant. I wanted to ask if she'd even read what I just signed. But instead, I nodded and looked out at the driveway where Dad's new truck sat, freshly washed and gleaming. I saved the text message as a draft and shoved my phone into my pocket. Maybe Aunt Patty was right. Maybe I was overthinking. But that photo stayed in my camera roll, just in case. Last Christmas, Dad had laughed at my job during dinner. I worked as a project accountant at a design-build firm, reconciling invoices and managing payment schedules. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I was good at it. "Lauren does arts and crafts with spreadsheets," he joked, and Dylan clapped like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. I'd been clearing plates at the time, scraping mashed potatoes into the trash while they laughed. Dad reached over and ruffled my hair like I was 12. "It's cute, though. Your little paycheck." I didn't say anything. I just kept clearing the table, stacking dishes carefully so they wouldn't crack. My grandmother, sitting in the corner, had caught my eye and gestured for me to come closer. "Keep receipts, not grudges," she'd whispered, pressing a folded 20 into my hand. At the time, I thought she meant Christmas receipts for returns. Now I understood she meant something bigger. Dad had always been like this. Loud, confident, quick to dismiss anything that wasn't his idea. He ran a small construction business called Pierce Projects, mostly kitchen renovations and bathroom remodels. It did okay, but never great. He was always one big job away from breaking through, or so he claimed. I should have seen the pattern then. But family loyalty made me blind. At work the next Monday, I sat under the fluorescent lights of our office, reconciling subcontractor invoices like always. The project managers trusted me because numbers didn't lie. I caught mistakes before they became problems. I made sure everyone got paid on time. During my lunch break, I printed out a copy of our firm's standard partnership agreement language. I wasn't sure why. Maybe Grandma's voice was still echoing in my head. Maybe that member contribution agreement was bothering me more than I wanted to admit. I folded the printout and tucked it into my desk drawer, under a stack of old timesheets. Just in case I ever needed to compare. Just in case I wanted to understand what I'd actually signed. My coworker Amy walked past and glanced at my desk. "You okay? You look stressed." "I'm fine," I lied, closing the drawer. Just family stuff. She nodded sympathetically and kept walking. I turned back to my computer and opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it Pierce Evidence, even though I felt ridiculous doing it. What was I gathering evidence for? My own father wouldn't scam me. But I dragged that photo of the signature page into the folder anyway. And I saved a blank document titled Timeline just to keep track of things. Just to be smart, like Grandma said. Keep receipts, not grudges. The bank transfer happened 3 days later. Dad texted me instructions. Wire $48,000 to the Pierce Projects business account. Memo line Bridge Capital. I sat in my car outside the bank, staring at my phone. That was nearly everything I'd saved over 4 years. Every overtime shift, every tax refund, every birthday check from Grandma. My emergency fund. My future. But Dad said it was temporary. He said a big client payment was coming in 2 weeks, and I'd get my money back plus 10% interest. He said this was how families invested in each other. I walked inside and filled out the wire transfer form. My hands were steadier this time, but my chest felt tight. The teller smiled and processed it without questions. When I got back to my car, I saw Dad's text, Capital received. You're a lifesaver, kiddo. My chest dropped. Not loan received. Capital. Like I was an investor. Like this was something more than just helping out. I opened my phone and took a screenshot of the bank confirmation. Then I screenshotted Dad's text messages, including that word, capital. I printed everything at work the next day and added it to a manila folder I kept in my closet at home. Just receipts. Not grudges. 2 weeks later, Dad forwarded me a selfie. He was standing in a bank lobby with his arm around a man in a suit. The text read, "We got the line of credit. 75K approved." Aunt Patty replied immediately, with confetti emojis. Dylan sent a thumbs up. I stared at my phone, confused. If the line of credit went through, why did he need my $48,000? I clicked on the attachment Dad had forwarded by accident. It was a PDF of the loan approval letter. My eyes scanned down to the collateral section for 28 Maple Street. That was the house. The house where I grew up. The house Grandma left to Dad in her will. He'd used the house as collateral for a business line of credit. Without telling anyone, I saved the PDF to my phone, then uploaded it to my laptop. I dragged it into the Pierce Evidence folder and renamed it Line of Credit Collateral. My hands were shaking again. I wanted to call him. I wanted to ask why he needed my savings if he had $75,000 available. But something told me not to. Something told me to just keep watching. Keep documenting. So I did. I saved everything. And I waited. A month passed. Dad posted on social media about a kitchen renovation he'd just finished. Granite countertops, custom cabinets, the works. Another successful Pierce Projects build, he wrote, with photos of the happy clients. He called me that night. Great news, Lauren. That Maple Avenue job came in profitable. We're doing really well. That's great, Dad, I said carefully. Does that mean you can pay back my loan? Silence. Then loan? Lauren, family doesn't count profits like that. You're part of this. When the business does well, we all do well. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. But you said 2 weeks. It's been over a month. Don't be greedy, he said, and his tone had shifted. I raised you better than that. We'll settle up when the time is right. He hung up before I could respond. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall. Then I opened my laptop and exported our entire text conversation to PDF. Every message, every promise, every use of the word capital. The next morning, I received an email at work. It was from one of our subcontractors, sent to me by mistake. The subject line read, Change order, Pierce Kitchen Reno. The body mentioned, utilizing Lauren's capital contribution for material costs. My stomach turned cold. I forwarded the email to my personal account, then printed it. Another page for the folder. I started watching the business account. Dad had added me as a secondary user months ago, so I could help with bookkeeping if he ever needed it. He never asked me to help, but the access remained. I logged in one evening and saw something that made my palms go cold. A client payment of $18,000 had hit the Pierce Project's account on Friday. By Monday morning, $17,500 had transferred out to an account labeled Pierce Personal. I clicked through the transaction details. It went straight to Dad's personal mortgage payment. The business money was paying his house note within 24 hours of receiving it. I grabbed my phone and opened the screen recording app. I recorded myself scrolling through the transactions, zooming in on dates and amounts, showing the transfer path clearly. When I finished, I uploaded the video to a cloud storage folder and added the timestamp in a document. This wasn't a loan. This wasn't even a business investment. This was something else entirely, and I was part of it whether I wanted to be or not. I texted Dad, "Hey, just checking in on when I might see the repayment." He replied 3 hours later, "Stop being impatient. You're acting like a bank." I didn't respond. I just saved the text. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandma's house, about my savings, about that member contribution agreement I'd signed without reading carefully. So I did what I always did when I needed clarity. I researched. I spent an entire Saturday reading about business partnerships, capital contributions, and member agreements. I learned that if you contribute money to a business and participate in its operations, you might be considered a partner whether you intended to be or not. I learned about partnership by conduct. I learned about fiduciary duty and misappropriation. On Monday, I called a business attorney named Ms. Adler. Her office was downtown, quiet and lined with law books. I brought my folder. She read everything. The signature page photo. The text messages calling my money capital. The bank transfers. The collateral documents. The screen recording of funds moving to Dad's personal account. When she finished, she looked up at me with a calm expression. "This is partnership by conduct. You contributed capital." He used partnership language. "You're entitled to an accounting of how your funds were used. No shouting necessary, just filings." My throat tightened. "He'll never agree to that." "He doesn't have to agree," she said. "We file a petition for accounting and a temporary restraining order to prevent further transfers. Let the court decide." I sat there for a long moment. Then I nodded. "Okay, let's do it." That Sunday, I went to church like always. Dad was there too, shaking hands and smiling. After the service, he stood up during community announcements and said he was disappointed in my sense of entitlement lately. People looked at me. I felt my face go hot, but I didn't say anything. I just helped stack chairs in the fellowship hall like I always did. When we finished, I walked out to the parking lot. A woman in a business suit approached Dad near his truck. She handed him an envelope. "Mr. Pierce, you've been served." Dad's face went white, then red. He ripped open the envelope and started reading. His hands were shaking. Dylan ran over, demanding to know what was happening. I got in my car and drove home. My phone exploded with messages. Aunt Patty. Dylan. Even people from church. But I didn't answer. I'd said everything I needed to say in court documents. Ms. Adler texted me an hour later. "Temporary restraining order hearing scheduled for Thursday. Be ready." I was ready. I'd been ready since the moment I took that first photo. Thursday morning, we stood in a small courtroom. Dad had hired a lawyer, some guy from his poker group who mostly did real estate closings. Ms. Adler presented our evidence calmly. The texts, the bank records, the subcontractor email. The judge reviewed everything and granted a temporary restraining order. No further transfers from the business account to personal accounts. The judge also ordered Dad to produce all business records, contracts, ledgers, bank statements, invoices. Dad smirked. "There are no formal records, Your Honor. It's a small operation." The judge's expression didn't change. "Then produce what exists. All bank statements, all communications, all contracts. Discovery begins immediately." Ms. Adler handed the clerk a list of subpoenas. Bank records. The notary's journal from our signing. Communications with subcontractors. Dad's face went pale as the judge read the list aloud. Outside the courtroom, Dylan cornered me. "This is insane, Lauren. Drop it, and I'll loan you $5,000. Just let it go." I looked at his expensive watch, the one Dad bought him for his birthday.
No.
You're tearing this family apart, he hissed. Dad did that when he took my money, I said and walked away. Discovery took 6 weeks. We received boxes of messy ledgers, missing invoices, and a handwritten notebook labeled profit tracking. I spent evenings cross-referencing dates with my screenshots and bank records. Nothing matched. Dad claimed one amount for the Maple Avenue job. The bank records showed a different amount. The client's canceled check showed a third amount. Ms. Adler hired a forensic accountant. His name was Vincent, and he had the kind of calm that came from finding financial chaos every day. He spent 2 weeks reviewing everything. When he finished, he scheduled a call with me. Your father's been running personal expenses through the business and using client payments to cover his mortgage. Your $48,000 was deposited and immediately used to pay overdue supplier invoices. Essentially, you kept his business from collapsing. So, I'm a partner? I asked. The court will decide that. But yes, in my professional opinion, your contribution and his language clearly indicate partnership, not a loan. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in my apartment and cried for the first time since this started. Not because I was sad, because I was angry, and because I finally understood that Grandma had been right.
Keep receipts.
They matter. The hearing was scheduled for early March. Vincent testified first, explaining calmly how my funds had been used, how profits had been diverted, and how the text messages clearly indicated a capital relationship, not a loan. Dad's lawyer tried to argue that the messages were just casual family talk. Vincent pulled up the subcontractor email mentioning Lauren's capital contribution. The courtroom went silent. Then Ms. Adler played the screen recording I'd made of the bank transfers. The timestamps were clear. The amounts were exact. The path from business to personal was undeniable. Dad's mouth got tighter with each piece of evidence. When the judge asked him directly if he'd used business funds for his personal mortgage, he hesitated too long before answering. The judge ordered a receiver to take control of Pierce projects immediately. Someone neutral would oversee the business, review all transactions, and report back to the court. Dad stood up furious. You can't do this. It's my business. The judge looked at him calmly. If it's a partnership, Mr. Pierce, it's not just yours. Sit down. He sat. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. I stared straight ahead, my hands folded in my lap. I felt nothing but a strange, cold relief. The receiver's name was Mr. Haynes. He was a retired accountant who'd done this work for decades. He visited every active job site, interviewed subcontractors, and reviewed every document Dad finally produced. One by one, the subcontractors admitted they'd been waiting for Lauren's money to get paid. One of them even showed Mr. Haynes a text from Dad. My daughter's investment came through. You'll have your check Friday. Investment. Not loan. Investment. Mr. Haynes documented everything in a 50-page report. When he submitted it to the court, Ms. Adler called me. It's even worse than we thought. He's been juggling payments for 18 months. Your money didn't just help. It saved him from bankruptcy. That same week, I received a certified letter at my apartment. It was from Dad's bank. The line of credit was in default. He'd violated the covenants by transferring business funds to personal accounts. The collateral property for 28 Maple Street was at risk of foreclosure. I sat on my couch and thought about Grandma, about the house where she taught me to bake cookies, where I learned to ride a bike in the driveway. Dad was going to lose it because he'd been stealing from his own business.
From me.
Ms. Adler requested mediation. We met in a conference room downtown. A professional mediator explained the process, and we began. I offered a clean buyout. I'd take my $48,000 back, plus reasonable interest, and walk away. Dad could keep the business. We'd call it settled. Dad leaned back in his chair and laughed. You're ungrateful. After everything I've done for you. You took my savings, I said quietly. I gave you opportunities, he snapped. I raised you. I put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me. The mediator sighed. Mr. Pierce, let's focus on the financial resolution. But Dad wouldn't. He ranted about betrayal and disloyalty. He said I'd always been difficult. He said I was just like my mother, who'd left when I was 8 because she couldn't handle his ambition. I stood up. We're done here. Ms. Adler followed me out. In the hallway, she said, the judge will set a trial date for the partnership accounting. This is going all the way. I nodded. I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. The trial was set for May. In the meantime, Mr. Haynes continued running Pierce projects under court supervision. Dad was allowed to work on jobs, but he couldn't touch the money. Every payment went through Mr. Haynes, who paid suppliers and subcontractors first, then allocated the rest according to court guidelines. Dad hated it. He complained to anyone who would listen. But the jobs kept getting finished, and for the first time in years, subcontractors were getting paid on time. One of them, a plumber named Tony, called me. I don't know what you did, but thank you. Your dad owed me 11 grand for 8 months. I got paid last week. I didn't know what to say.
I'm glad.
He's been telling everyone you're stealing from him, Tony continued. But we all know better. We've been watching him rob Peter to pay Paul for years. You just finally said enough. After we hung up, I sat in my car and cried again. Not from sadness. From validation. From knowing I wasn't crazy for questioning things. The trial began on a Tuesday morning. The courtroom was small, just the judge, the lawyers, and a court reporter. Dad sat on one side with his attorney. I sat on the other with Ms. Adler. The judge asked Dad to explain the nature of the $48,000 transaction. Dad's lawyer stood and said it was a family loan, nothing more. Ms. Adler stood next. Your Honor, I'd like to present Mr. Pierce's own words. She projected the text messages on a screen. The one that said, your capital keeps us afloat. The one that said, you'll see your 10%. The one that called me an investor. The judge read them slowly. Then she looked at Dad. Mr. Pierce, would you read these messages aloud for the record? Dad's face went red. He stammered through the first one, then stopped. His lawyer whispered urgently. Continue, the judge said. He read them all. Each word sounded like it was choking him. When he finished, the courtroom was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. The judge made notes. Then she said, we'll adjourn until tomorrow. I'll issue my findings then. I barely slept that night. The judge issued her ruling at 10 the next morning. She found that a partnership by conduct had been established through my capital contribution, Dad's use of partnership language, and my ongoing involvement in business decisions, however minimal. She found that Dad had misappropriated business funds for personal use, violating his fiduciary duty as a partner. She ordered a full accounting of all business transactions going back 3 years. And she offered me a buyout option. I could take my share of the business based on a fair valuation, or Dad could buy me out at that same valuation within 90 days. Dad's lawyer stood immediately. Your Honor, my client doesn't have the funds for a buyout. Then he'll need to find them, the judge said. Or Ms. Pierce can exercise her option to assume control of the partnership assets. Dad stared at me across the courtroom. I stared back. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was just done. After court, Ms. Adler explained what would happen next. The business would be valued by an independent appraiser. Then Dad would have 90 days to buy me out, or I could take control. What about the house? I asked. She hesitated. The bank's foreclosure notice is still active. If he can't resolve the default, they'll proceed. Can I resolve it? She looked at me carefully. If you end up with the business assets, you could negotiate with the bank. But Lauren, that's your childhood home. Are you sure? I thought about Grandma, about receipts, about being smart instead of emotional. I'm sure. 3 weeks later, the business was valued at $87,000 after debts. My share as a partner was determined to be 42% based on my capital contribution and the profits I should have received. Dad owed me $36,540 as a buyout. He had 90 days to pay. He didn't have it. I knew he didn't. Dad would have 30 days to vacate. You're taking my house, Dad said, his voice hollow. Your grandmother's house. You used it as collateral, I replied quietly. You risked it, not me. "I'll fight this," he said, but there was no energy behind it.
You already did, Ms. Adler said.
"And you lost. Sign the papers, Mr. Pierce."
He signed.
His hand shook. When it was done, he stood up and walked out without another word. Dylan followed, slamming the door behind them. I sat there holding the deed to 428 Maple Street. The house where I grew up. The house where Grandma taught me to keep receipts. The title agent smiled sympathetically. "Congratulations, I suppose." I nodded. It didn't feel like winning. It just felt like surviving. Dad moved out 2 weeks later. He refused the offer I made through Ms. Adler. He could lease part of the house at a fair rate while he rebuilt his finances.
His pride wouldn't allow it.
Instead, he moved into a friend's spare room across town. Dylan helped him move his stuff. Aunt Patty called me crying, saying I'd destroyed the family. I didn't argue. I just listened until she hung up. I walked through the empty house the day after he left. The living room echoed. The kitchen still smelled faintly like his coffee. The dents in the banister were the ones my hands made as a kid, running up and down the stairs. I ran my fingers over those dents and thought about Grandma, about how she'd wanted this house to stay in the family, about how she'd whispered to keep receipts, not grudges. I wasn't holding grudges. I was holding boundaries. I called an inspector first, then a contractor. I wanted to do this right.
No shortcuts.
Everything permitted. Everything legal. The idea came to me during a sleepless night. The house had a detached garage that Dad had used for storage. It was big, well-lit, and structurally sound. I met with the city planning department and explained my idea: convert the garage into a woodworking classroom. Teach kids from the community basic construction skills. Run it through a nonprofit called the Pierce Apprenticeship Trust. They loved it. The permits were approved within 6 weeks. I hired the contractor who'd done the inspection, and we got to work. Everything was done to code. The city inspector signed off on every phase. A local lumberyard heard about the project and donated scrap wood for the classes. A retired teacher from the high school volunteered to help with lesson plans. Slowly, the garage transformed into something beautiful. I hung Grandma's old tape measure by the door. The one she'd used to teach me how to measure twice and cut once. It felt right. The first class was on a Saturday morning in August. 12 teenagers showed up, nervous and excited. I taught them how to read a tape measure, how to use a handsaw safely, how to plane a piece of pine until it was smooth. The room smelled like sawdust and potential. I watched them work, their faces focused and proud when they finished their first projects. A neighbor walking by peeked in the window and smiled. "It's loud," she called, "but good loud." At the end of class, one of the students asked me why I'd started the program. I thought about lying about giving some noble answer, but I told the truth. My grandmother taught me that skills matter, that if you can build something with your hands, nobody can take that away from you. I wanted to pass that on. They nodded, and we cleaned up together. I locked the door and stood in the driveway, looking at the house. It didn't feel haunted by the past anymore. It felt like a fresh start. Church stopped asking me to forgive and forget. Word had spread about what really happened, about the court findings, about Dad's misappropriation. Aunt Patty showed up at the house one afternoon with a container of cookies. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I should have listened to you." I invited her in. We sat in the kitchen and drank tea. She told me Dad was struggling, working odd jobs, and barely making rent. Dylan had updated his social media bio, removing any mention of family business. "Nobody calls you dramatic anymore," she said. I didn't respond. I didn't need their validation. I'd had the truth all along. The receipts had spoken for me. After she left, I hung Grandma's tape measure by the front door too, next to my keys. A reminder every time I left the house: measure twice, cut once. Be smart. Be prepared. Sunday morning, after the second month of classes, I locked up the workshop and rolled the tool cart into its corner. Sunlight streamed through the side window, lighting up the sawdust in the air like gold. My phone was quiet. No messages from Dad. No demands from Dylan. No guilt trips from Aunt Patty. Just silence. Peaceful, earned silence. I thought about the girl who'd signed those papers at the kitchen island, hands shaking, desperate to be a good daughter. I thought about how scared she'd been. How she'd taken that photo anyway, just in case. That photo had saved me. Those receipts had saved me. Grandma's voice, echoing across the years, had saved me. They'd called it family to ignore the math. They'd expected me to be grateful while they stole from me. They'd counted on my silence. But I learned the math. I kept the receipts. And when the judge asked for evidence, I had it all. Now I stood in a house I'd saved, running a program that helped kids learn real skills, living a life built on truth instead of obligation. The family had wanted me to be small and quiet and obedient. Instead, I measured twice. And I cut clean.